The yellow glow of the street lamps cast Eli Hayes's long, lopsided shadow across the wet sidewalk. It was well past 2 in the morning, and the city seemed to have settled into a tired sleep after a long, noisy day. Eli, 68, could feel the cold wind seeping through his thin, worn-out coat. His back was slightly hunched, not just from age but from years of quiet labor. His thin shoulders had once supported a family, and now they continued to shoulder the work that few people noticed. He had just finished his shift as a night janitor at the Grand Harmony Hall, a renowned opera and concert house that was the cultural heart of the city. The Grand Harmony Hall, with its ornate classical architecture, majestic statues, and lavish furnishings, was a world away from the small, modest apartment Eli headed for. During the day, it hosted distinguished guests, talented artists, and demanding critics. At night, when the stage lights were dimmed, the applause quieted, and the expensive costumes were removed, the theater belonged to people like Eli. He swept the red velvet seats, vacuumed the intricate Persian carpets, and polished the polished marble hallways where, just hours earlier, the footsteps of the upper class had left their marks. The work was anonymous, but Eli did it with extraordinary care and respect, as if he were tending a cathedral. His hair was almost completely white, with only a few black strands remaining, as if trying to hold on to the traces of time. Wrinkles were skewed on his forehead and the corners of his eyes, but his eyes, though a little tired of someone who worked late at night, still shone with a thoughtful, profound, and strangely gentle look. He did not talk much, often just worked quietly observed. To his younger colleagues, he was a quiet, old man Eli, somewhat difficult to understand, but always willing to help if anyone needed it. No one knew much about his past, nor was anyone curious. In the world of manual workers, the past is often more of a burden than a source of pride. Tonight, Eli felt a little hungry. His dinner was usually just a piece of bread or some leftovers from the afternoon. He turned into a small, quieter street, where there was a quiet park that he sometimes stopped by on his way home. The park was on the edge of a well-off residential area. The houses here were large and quiet behind sturdy fences. Eli found a dry stone bench under an old oak tree and slowly sat down. He took a simple sandwich from his worn canvas shoulder bag, a familiar snack. He ate slowly, chewing thoroughly, looking up at the night sky dotted with a few faint stars, trying to find some peace before returning to his cramped rented room. Not far away, a police cruiser rolled slowly by. Inside, Officer Kevin Baxter, 35, yawned. Tonight was boring. He didn't like night shifts, especially in quiet areas like this one. Baxter was a big man, but the bulge around his waist suggested he had little interest in physical training. He wore a permanent frown, impatient, as if the world owed him something. Baxter had grown up with prejudices he never questioned, and those prejudices had only grown more ingrained over the years as a police officer. He believed he could see through people, especially those he considered troublesome, and his criteria for judging them were often based on their skin color, how they dressed, and where they came from. As the patrol car's headlights swept across the park, Baxter squinted. A figure sat on a bench, male, dark, dressed shabbily. At this hour, here, all the signs in Baxter's head immediately went red. He curled his lips, a smug smile flickering across his face. Another tramp, or worse, he muttered to his dozing colleague, who merely grunted in response. Baxter decided to check. He slowed down and stopped not far from the bench, deliberately shining the headlights directly into Eli's face, causing him to squint and raise his hand to shield his eyes. Eli was a little startled, but quickly regained his composure. He knew this type of check well. Baxter stepped out of the car, his gait somewhat heavy but trying to look majestic. He approached Eli, his right hand resting lightly on the gun at his side, an inherent habit of showing his power. His voice was curt and full of superiority. "Hey, old man, what the hell are you doing here at this hour? The park's been closed for a long time. Don't you know how to read the sign out there?" Eli slowly lowered his hand, his eyes meeting Baxter's, unflinching but not defiant. "Hello, officer. I just got off work. Just thinking of sitting down for a bit before heading home." His voice was low and even, a little tired but clear. Baxter smirked, his gaze sweeping Eli from head to toe, stopping briefly at his faded work clothes and worn shoes. "Work? What kind of work is it that's ending so late? Picking up scrap metal?" he asked, his tone clearly mocking. "Or working at one of the houses around here?" He nodded toward the silent mansions. Eli felt a familiar sadness rise in his heart. He had heard words like these countless times in his life. "I work as a janitor at the Grand Harmony Hall, sir." "The Grand Harmony Hall?" Baxter repeated, his suspicion undiminished. "The Opera House? You work there?" He looked at Eli as if he had just told a far-fetched story. "Here's your identification. Let me see it." His tone was commanding without a trace of politeness. Eli sighed discreetly, then slowly reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out an old wallet. He carefully pulled out his ID card and handed it to Baxter. Baxter snatched it, glanced at the name and address, then threw it back to Eli carelessly, causing the card to fall to the ground near his feet. "Address in the slums? What are you doing all the way here?" Eli bent down to pick up the card, brushed the dust off it, and put it back in his wallet. He did not answer the accusatory question. His silence seemed to make Baxter even more uncomfortable. "I'm asking you, old man, what's your intention in sneaking around here?" Baxter growled, taking a step forward, invading Eli's personal space. "Looking for vulnerable houses to steal from? Or dealing in contraband? This is a rich area. Lots of targets, huh?" Baxter's every word was like a needle stabbing Eli's self-esteem. He had lived his whole life trying to maintain dignity, trying to work honestly. But just because of his skin color and appearance, he constantly faced suspicion and contempt. "Officer," Eli finally said, his voice surprisingly calm, "I am a law-abiding citizen. I have done nothing wrong. I just want some peace and quiet after a hard night's work." "A quiet rest?" Baxter gave a dry laugh. "This is no place for the likes of you to rest in peace. Understand? The next time I see you hanging around here at this hour, I won't say so much. Get lost." Eli looked Baxter straight in the eyes. He saw nothing but hatred and blind prejudice. He didn't want to argue anymore. He was tired. He was tired of this pointless confrontation. He stood up, about to leave. He just wanted to go home, to his small room and his old piano, where he could find some real peace. At that moment, a black luxury car slowly approached and stopped not far away. The back door opened, and a woman with neatly trimmed platinum hair, elegantly dressed in a dark blue evening gown, stepped out. It was Ms. Eleanor Vance, the city's leading music critic, a sharp writer who artists both respected and feared. She was also a member of the board of directors of the Grand Harmony Hall and, more importantly, one of the few who remembered and appreciated the name Elijah Ivory Keys Hayes from decades ago. Ms. Vance had just left a charity party at a nearby mansion. As she drove through the park, she caught a glimpse of a familiar figure standing near a police car. Despite the darkness and the distance, there was something about the man's posture, the way he remained silent facing the police officer, That made her uneasy and curious. She asked the driver to stop. "What's going on here, officer?" Ms. Vance asked, her voice clear and authoritative, though not raising. She moved closer, and as the streetlights fell on the face of the man facing the police officer, she paused, her eyes wide with surprise and an indescribable emotion. "Mr. Hayes? Elijah? What happened to you?" Baxter turned, a little surprised by the presence of a woman who looked rich and powerful. He tried to adjust his demeanor, to appear a little more professional, though the annoyance was still evident on his face. "Hello? Just doing a routine check, ma'am. This man has been acting suspiciously in the park at this hour." He glanced at Eli with undisguised disdain. Ms. Vance looked at Baxter, then at Eli, who was still standing there, silent. But there was a hint of surprise in his eyes at seeing her. She quickened her pace toward Eli. "Suspicious behavior?" Ms. Vance repeated, her voice noticeably colder now. She turned to face Baxter, the sharp eyes of a critic now fixed on the policeman. "Officer, are you aware of who you are talking to?" Baxter frowned, confused by the strange woman's attitude. "Ma'am, this is just an old janitor. Is there something special I should know?" He tried to sound confident, but his voice was a little less certain. Ms. Vance could hardly believe what she was hearing. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her composure, but anger began to rise in her voice. "An old janitor?" She glared at Baxter. "Officer, the man you just called so disrespectful is Elijah Hayes, Elijah Ivory Keys Hayes. Do you know what that name means?" Baxter stared. The name sounded familiar, but he couldn't immediately place it. He looked at Eli, then at Ms. Vance, trying to piece it all together. "Elijah Ivory Keys Hayes," Ms. Vance continued, her voice now filled with emotion and respect for Eli, and a silent rebuke to Baxter. "He was a legend in jazz, officer, a gifted pianist, a treasure this city once owned and almost forgot. The Grand Harmony Hall, the place he now cleans every night for a living, was once the stage where thousands of people crowded, lined up just to get a ticket to hear him play. Those fingers you call the old janitor have touched hearts, created timeless melodies." Ms. Vance paused, letting her words sink into the thick air. She remembered wild jazz nights of her youth, when she had been a music student, fascinated by Eli's playing. "I remember one time," she said, her voice a little distant. "He played an impromptu solo that lasted nearly 20 minutes. Not a single note wasted, not a single dull moment. The whole room held its breath. At the end of the piece, there was silence for a few seconds before the applause exploded like thunder. It was magic, officer. Magic that only true geniuses can create." Officer Baxter's face slowly changed. From the initial flush of anger and pride, it turned pale, then ashen. He gaped, looking at Eli as if he were some strange creature. "A legend of jazz, a great pianist?" he stammered, the words escaping his throat. But he's just..." He couldn't finish. The image of the poor, old janitor he had just despised and the image of a musical legend this elegant woman had described were completely opposite, irreconcilable in his mind at the moment. The truth was like a bucket of cold water thrown in his face, leaving him stunned and utterly ashamed. Eli stood there, silent as he had been all along. He showed no sign of triumph or glee at Baxter's humiliation. There was only a deep sadness in his eyes. Sadness for the prejudices that had been ingrained in society. Sadness for forgotten talents. And perhaps a little sadness for his own life. Ms. Vance had no intention of letting this matter end so easily. She looked at Baxter with a stern gaze. "Your attitude and behavior tonight, officer, towards a citizen, especially one as respected as Mr. Hayes, was completely unacceptable. This was not only a personal disrespect, but also a manifestation of a larger problem, one that your police department needs to take seriously. I will be reporting this entire incident to your superiors, along with your name and badge number." She finished, pulling her smartphone from her purse, her finger swiping across the screen as if she were about to make an important call. Officer Baxter was truly shocked. The prospect of an internal investigation, disciplinary action, and even the loss of his career was clearly before his eyes. The previous arrogance and superiority had completely disappeared, replaced by a worried, pleading expression. He turned to Eli, his voice trembling, stuttering with difficulty. "Sir, Mr. Hayes, I'm truly sorry. I was completely wrong. I didn't know. I was so foolish, so shallow. Please forgive me for my stupidity and disrespect. I'm truly sorry." His apology now, although it came more from fear than from sincere repentance from the bottom of his heart, seemed more sincere than his previous arrogant words. Eli looked at Baxter, not with the eyes of a victor looking at a loser, but with the eyes of an adult looking at a child who had just made a mistake. He nodded slightly, his voice strangely calm, without a trace of resentment. "Officer, I accept your apology, but more importantly, I hope that from now on you will learn to look at people with your heart and understanding, not just with your eyes and preconceived notions. Each person has a story, a value of their own. Don't rush to judge when you don't know anything about them." Ms. Vance kept her face stern, but she lowered the phone. She knew Eli was a forgiving man. "Mr. Hayes has forgiven you, but that doesn't mean your actions will go unnoticed. Officer Baxter, I will still report this to the police department. They need to know how their officers treat the public, especially those who are less fortunate." Ms. Vance then turned to Eli, her voice warm and respectful. "Mr. Hayes, I'm at a loss for words. Seeing you like this, it's unbelievable that you're still here, doing this. The music world lost so much when you decided to leave." Eli smiled slightly, a smile that was a little shy and sad. "Life has its own ways, Mrs. Vance. I had my reasons. I understand." Missy Vance nodded. "But your talent is a gift. It shouldn't be buried." She looked at Eli with a thought in mind. "Mr. Hayes, maybe this is a sign. Maybe it's time for you to come back." The fateful encounter in the park that night sent ripples throughout the city. True to her word, Miss Vance contacted the head of the city police department. Officer Kevin Baxter was immediately called in. The tape recording from Baxter's body camera, a mandatory device for patrol officers, captured the entire conversation and his demeanor. Baxter was indisputably reprimanded by his superiors for his unprofessional behavior, abuse of power, and especially his discriminatory attitude based on the appearance and circumstances of citizens. He was suspended for a month, ordered to attend mandatory courses on cultural etiquette, identifying and combating prejudice, and community communication skills. Baxter's career was left with a dark mark that was difficult to erase. And more importantly, he began to rethink what he had done, how he had viewed the world. Shame and regret, albeit belatedly, began to creep into his jaded mind. Meanwhile, the story of janitor Eli and the true identity of a jazz legend quickly spread throughout the Grand Harmony Hall, from senior management to the service staff and stage technicians. At first there was surprise, then curiosity, and finally, awe and admiration. Colleagues who had only known Eli as a quiet, taciturn old janitor now looked at him with a completely different light. They began to recall the times they had seen him sitting pensively at the old piano in the staff room during rare breaks, his skinny fingers lightly gliding over the keys, creating short but enchanting improvised melodies that they had previously overlooked. The theater management, after learning the full story from Ms. Vance and her own emotional accounts of Eli's talent, felt both ashamed that they had not recognized the treasure working under their roof, and also felt an opportunity to do something meaningful. With strong encouragement from Ms. Vance, who is a respected voice in the arts, they decided to organize a special concert to honor Elijah Ivory Keys Hayes. They wanted to invite him back to the grand stage of the Grand Harmony Hall, where he had seen the most glorious days of his career, so that he could once again live his passion, and so that the public could once again enjoy his extraordinary talent. When the idea was proposed to Eli, he immediately rejected it. "No, he said, a little panicked. "I've been away from the stage too long. My fingers are rusty. My soul is not what it used to be. I'm just an old janitor." Fear and self-consciousness accumulated after years of living in seclusion made him hesitate. But Ms. Vance did not give up easily. She visited Eli in his small apartment, where she saw the old but carefully cleaned piano, the yellowed jazz records neatly arranged. She talked to him for hours, rekindling musical memories, reminding him of the love his audience once had for him, and most importantly, reminding him of the passion that still smoldered somewhere in his heart. "Eli," she said, "the music never left you. You just left it. This is not only an opportunity for you, but also for us, for music lovers, to once again hear your heart through the keys. Don't let fear obscure the gift that God has given you." His colleagues at the Grand Harmony Hall were also very supportive. The young sound engineer who had secretly listened to Eli play during breaks brought him old recordings he had collected. The barmaid shyly asked for his autograph on a napkin. Their sincerity and admiration gradually softened Eli's heart. And perhaps, deep inside him, the desire to touch the ivory keys again, to lose himself in improvisational jazz melodies, had never really cooled. Finally, after much hesitation, Eli nodded in agreement. News of the concert, return of a legend, Elijah Ivory Keys Hayes, quickly spread throughout the city. The media got involved, and articles about Eli's strange life, from the height of fame to his reclusive life as a janitor, and his unexpected reappearance, attracted a large public audience. Tickets for the show sold out in just a few hours. Old fans, now middle-aged or older, were eager to relive a piece of their youth. Younger people, curious about a legendary name being unearthed, also came. The special night finally arrived. The Grand Harmony Hall was packed. The atmosphere in the auditorium was solemn, yet a little nervous and expectant. As the stage lights dimmed and focused on the shiny black grand piano in the center, an almost absolute silence fell. Then Eli stepped out, wearing the simple but formal black suit that the theater had prepared for him. He was still slightly hunched, still walking slowly, but there was a solemnity and a slight tremor in every gesture. He bowed to the audience, a humble bow. As Eli sat down at the piano, as his thin, somewhat trembling fingers touched the first keys, a magical current seemed to run through the auditorium. The familiar yet new jazz notes began to sound, sometimes calm and narrative, sometimes sublime, powerful and spontaneous. It was not only the virtuoso technique of a master, but also the heart of a man who had experienced many ups and downs in life. His music told a story of joy, sadness, loss, hope, and above all, the inalienable dignity of a human being. The melodies were sometimes haunting, sometimes free, like an endless flow of emotions. The audience seemed to be drawn into his musical world, forgetting everything around them. Ms. Vance sat in the front row, her eyes brimming with tears. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. In a corner at the back of the auditorium, a man in civilian clothes stood quietly against the wall. It was Officer Kevin Baxter. He had taken a day off from his suspension to come here. No one had invited him, but he felt compelled to come. He listened to Eli's music, watched the man he had once despised shine on stage, celebrated by thousands. A complex feeling welled up inside Baxter: shame, guilt, and for the first time in his life, something akin to awe. He was beginning to understand that the world was bigger than he had known, and that people were more complex than he had ever given them credit for. The performance ended with thunderous applause that lasted for a long time. The audience stood up and gave Eli the highest honor. Eli stood up, bowed his head in gratitude, and on his old face, a rare but extremely peaceful and satisfied smile bloomed. It was the smile of a person who had found himself again, found his passion again, and lived fully with it, even if only for a moment. The story of Elijah Ivory Keys Hayes is not only a story of a musical comeback, but also a profound lesson. It reminds each of us to never be too quick to judge a book by its cover. Appearance, current circumstances, or the job a person is doing cannot fully express the true value and qualities inside of a person. Each individual has their own story, their own experiences, hidden talents, or valuable qualities that we may not see. Respect is the foundation of all human relationships. It is not dependent on social status, skin color, religion, or any other superficial factor. When we treat others with prejudice and discrimination, we not only hurt them, but we also impoverish our own worldview, miss out on opportunities to learn and connect with the good. The silent melody of ordinary people like Eli still resonates every day in life, as long as we listen with all our hearts and an open mind. And who knows, in those melodies, we may find extraordinary things.